I thought I just bought a cheap cabin, but now an Apache woman in the basement says she's my wife. Ethan had always dreamed of escaping the chaos of city life. The constant noise, endless traffic, and people rushing everywhere had worn him down. He wanted something simple, quiet, and peaceful. A place where he could breathe, think, and maybe even find a little adventure. That's how he found himself scrolling through listings of old cabins online one late night. Most were expensive or in places too crowded for his liking, but then he saw it. A small, weathered cabin tucked away near a dense forest, far from any town. And the price? Almost unbelievable. It was cheap, much cheaper than anything else he had seen. Ethan's heart raced as he clicked on the listing. Pictures showed a rustic wooden cabin with a sloped roof, surrounded by trees in the soft light of the late afternoon sun. The windows were dusty and the paint had peeled in places, but there was something about it that made him smile. It looked lived in, but not neglected. He imagined sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the birds, or reading a book while the wind rustled the leaves. The idea of owning this little piece of peace made him giddy. He didn't hesitate. He called the number, asked a few questions, and made arrangements to see it the next weekend. The seller was an older man, polite but distant, who seemed almost relieved to get rid of the cabin. "It's a good place for someone who wants to be alone," the man said with a half smile. Ethan laughed and agreed. Alone was exactly what he wanted. The drive to the cabin was long, winding through narrow roads flanked by tall trees. As the city disappeared behind him, the air grew fresher, and a calm he hadn't felt in years began to settle over him. He kept imagining the weekend ahead, unpacking his few belongings, lighting a fire in the cabin's old fireplace, and simply existing without the stress of emails, deadlines, or honking cars. When he finally arrived, the cabin looked even better than he expected. The wood had a warm golden tone in the afternoon sunlight, and small wildflowers grew near the steps leading to the porch. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, a refreshing change from the smog of the city. Ethan parked his car, grabbed his bags, and stepped out. His boots crunched on the gravel, and he felt a thrill of excitement mixed with relief. He was finally here. The inside of the cabin was small but cozy. There was a single living room with a stone fireplace, a modest kitchen with wooden cabinets, and a tiny bathroom tucked in the corner. The furniture was old but sturdy, and the wooden floorboards creaked pleasantly under his weight. Dust covered some surfaces, and a few cobwebs clung to the corners, but nothing seemed broken or unsafe. He smiled. With a little cleaning and a few personal touches, this could be his perfect hideaway. As he explored, he noticed things that gave the cabin character. There were shelves lined with old books, a few faded photographs in black and white, and some Native American artifacts. A small dream catcher, a carved wooden figure, and a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. He paused, running his fingers lightly over them. They seemed ancient and important, yet somehow out of place in a modern world. Ethan shrugged. He didn't know their story, but they added a certain charm. Then he saw it. A door at the back of the cabin, partially hidden by a tall wooden cupboard. It was old and sturdy, with a rusted lock hanging from the handle. For some reason, it made him feel uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. He tried the handle, but it didn't budge. He frowned and walked away, convincing himself that it was probably just a storage room that had been locked for years. Nothing to worry about. The first night in the cabin was peaceful. Ethan made a small fire in the fireplace and sat in an old armchair with a cup of tea, listening to the wind whistle softly through the trees. The forest around him seemed alive with quiet sounds, owls calling, leaves rustling, and the distant splash of water from a stream he hadn't noticed during the day. He felt relaxed in a way he hadn't in years. But as the hours passed, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small, a faint creak from the floorboards upstairs, or the feeling of being watched when he walked past the shadows cast by the firelight. He told himself it was just his imagination, the result of staying up too late in an unfamiliar place. He laughed nervously and went to bed, thinking he would sleep well. In the middle of the night, Ethan was awakened by a soft whisper. It was so faint he could barely hear it, like someone speaking just beyond the edge of sound. He froze, straining his ears. The wind? Maybe. But then he heard it again. A low, almost melodic voice, seeming to come from below the floor. His heart pounded. He told himself to calm down. It was probably just the house settling. Old cabins made noises at night. That had to be it. Despite the eerie sound, Ethan managed to fall asleep again, though fitfully. Morning brought sunlight and a sense of relief. Everything looked normal in the daytime. The way the light hit the wooden walls made them glow warmly, and the forest outside seemed friendly and alive. He made breakfast, brewed coffee, and started unpacking his things, trying to focus on the excitement of being in his new retreat. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin was more than just a building. It had a presence, an energy that was subtle but undeniable. Every so often he thought he saw shadows moving in the corners of his vision, or glimpsed something out of the corner of his eye that vanished when he looked directly. He laughed at himself. "You've been cooped up in the city too long," he muttered. "It's just your imagination." Still, curiosity gnawed at him. The locked door in the back of the cabin called to him in a way he couldn't explain. He avoided it for now, telling himself he would deal with it later. Instead, he explored the area around the cabin. The forest was dense but beautiful, with narrow trails winding between the trees. Birds chirped and squirrels darted among the branches. Ethan felt alive, a sense of adventure stirring in him. By the end of the first day, Ethan had unpacked most of his belongings and made himself comfortable. He sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting on the small stream that ran near the edge of the property. Everything seemed perfect. He thought about the stories the old man had mentioned, the previous owner disappearing, the locals warning about the cabin, but he dismissed them. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses. He had a new home, and nothing else mattered. But as the night fell and darkness crept over the forest, Ethan heard it again. The soft whispering, coming from the basement. This time it was clearer, almost like words forming a sentence, though he couldn't understand them. He felt a chill run down his spine. His first instinct was to ignore it, but a part of him, the part that loved mystery and adventure, wanted to investigate. Ethan stood on the porch, staring at the dark outline of the cabin against the night sky. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and for a moment it almost sounded like the voice was carried by the breeze. He shivered, unsure if it was fear or excitement. He knew one thing for certain. This cabin, which he thought was just a cheap little getaway, was already showing him that it held secrets. And whatever lay behind that locked basement door, it was waiting for him. With a mix of anticipation and nervousness, Ethan went inside and looked at the door again. He ran his fingers along the lock. Feeling the cold metal, he hesitated. Something told him that whatever was down there would change everything. For the first time, the cheap cabin didn't feel like a bargain. It felt like the beginning of a story he wasn't sure he was ready to live, but one he couldn't ignore. And as he went to bed that night, the whispering continued, soft and persistent, echoing through the quiet cabin. Ethan didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, Ethan woke to the golden light streaming through the cabin's windows. For a moment, he felt a sense of normalcy, almost as if the strange whispers from the night before had been a dream. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the unease that had settled in his chest. After a quick breakfast, he wandered around the cabin, hoping that daylight would make the place feel completely ordinary again. But no matter how much he tried, the feeling of being watched lingered, subtle yet persistent, like a shadow at the edge of his vision. He found himself standing in front of the old basement door again. The lock hung there, rusted and ancient, daring him silently. The whispers from last night had come from down there. He was sure of it. Curiosity gnawed at him, stronger than fear this time. He had always loved solving mysteries and adventures, and he knew that if he ignored the door, he would never forgive himself. Slowly he bent down, trying the lock once more. To his surprise, it moved. It had loosened over time, or perhaps the stormy night had shifted something. With a deep breath, he turned it. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing darkness. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Its beam cut through the blackness, revealing stone steps that led down into the basement. The air smelled damp, like wet earth and old wood. He hesitated at the top of the stairs. Every story he had ever read about haunted houses and mysterious cabins flashed through his mind. But he told himself firmly, he was being silly. Nothing in the world could be dangerous down here, at least not in daylight. Step by step he descended. The floorboards groaned under his weight, echoing in the silence. At the bottom, he shined the flashlight around the room. It was bigger than he expected. Old furniture, boxes covered in dust, and more artifacts cluttered the space. And then he saw her. A woman stood near the far wall, dressed in clothing he couldn't place. Richly colored fabrics and intricate patterns that seemed both ancient and alive. Her long, dark hair framed a face that was calm, almost serene, but her eyes held something that stopped Ethan cold: recognition. She looked directly at him, and a chill ran down his spine. She was not afraid, and yet there was no doubt she belonged in that space. "You're here," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I knew you would come." Ethan blinked. I think you're mistaken. I'm Ethan." Who are you?" His voice wavered, not from fear, but from confusion. He had never seen this woman before in his life, yet her words carried a weight he couldn't explain. "My name is Ahuli," she said. "I am your wife. We were promised to each other long ago, and now you have returned to me." Ethan laughed nervously, trying to shake off the absurdity of what he had just heard. "My wife." "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I just bought this cabin yesterday." "I don't even know you." Ahuli stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You do know me." "You just do not remember yet. The bond between us is older than this life, older than these walls. Your soul and mine are tied. We were married in another time."
Ethan took a step back. "Another time?"
Are you saying you're a ghost?
Or something? His mind was racing. Was he imagining things? Was this some trick by the previous owner? Or had the long hours of travel and the stress of moving finally broken him? "I am not a ghost," Ahuli said firmly. "I am real as the trees outside and the wind that carries the whispers. You must trust me, even if your mind cannot yet accept it." He could feel a strange pull toward her, a connection he couldn't name or explain. Her words, her presence, felt familiar in a way that made his skin tingle. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time. I don't understand. Why are you here?" "Why now?" Ahuli's eyes softened. "Because the time has come for us to remember. The cabin called you here, and I have waited. We were separated by fate, but destiny has brought us back together. You must see, Ethan, that this is not a coincidence." He felt his head spinning.
Destiny separated by what?
I don't even know where to start. Ahuli walked closer, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "Then start here. Start with me. Let me help you remember who you are, and who we were." Her touch was gentle, yet it sparked something deep inside him. A memory, a feeling, a life he could not fully recall, but seemed to recognize. Ethan shook his head. I think I need to sit down." He lowered himself onto a dusty chair, trying to process everything. The room was silent except for the distant sound of wind moving through the trees outside. His mind reeled with questions. Was this real? Was she real? How could she know so much about him when they had never met in this life? "Take your time," Ahuli said, her voice calm and patient. She did not move closer, but her presence filled the room, comforting and commanding all at once. "I will not leave until you are ready to see the truth. He thought of the artifacts in the cabin, the whispers he had heard last night, and the feeling that this place was alive. Slowly, pieces of memory began to surface, like fragments of a dream. Faces he did not recognize yet felt familiar. Places he had never been in this life, but had walked in another. The feeling of being tethered to something beyond time itself. When he opened his eyes, Ahuli was closer, yet still respectful of his space. "You remember nothing, and that is natural," she said softly. "The memories will come. But for now, you must accept that I am here, and that we are connected. There is a reason you bought this cabin. It is not mere chance." Ethan nodded slowly, though he did not fully understand. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was impossible, that he was losing control. But another part, the part that believed in the unseen and the mysterious, wanted to trust her, to explore this connection, to discover the truth behind her words. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why now? Why this cabin?" Ahuli's gaze drifted to the shadows in the corners of the basement, as if the walls themselves held secrets. "Because the cabin is sacred. It is where the bond between our souls is anchored. It has waited for you, as I have waited. Everything you have experienced, the whispers, the feelings of being watched, was preparation. The cabin has been calling you, guiding you here, to this moment." Ethan's mind reeled. He wanted to protest, to insist that this was insane, but deep down, he could not. There was a pull in his chest, a gentle tug that made him feel that she spoke the truth. He glanced at her again, searching her eyes. They were steady, unwavering, full of knowledge and patience, as if she had seen centuries pass while waiting for this very moment. For a long while, neither spoke. The wind outside moaned softly through the trees, and the cabin seemed to breathe around them. Ethan realized that the whispers he had heard were gone, replaced by an almost sacred silence, as if the house itself was acknowledging the presence of its rightful occupants. Finally he whispered, almost to himself, "I don't know what to do." Ahuli smiled faintly. "For now, you must simply accept that I am here and that our journey together begins now. You will understand everything in time. But the first step is to trust me and to trust the cabin." Ethan nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. He did not fully understand, and he might never fully understand, but there was a truth in her presence that he could not deny. He felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that there was more to life than the ordinary, the mundane, and the predictable. And somehow, despite fear and uncertainty, he knew that his life had changed forever. As the day passed, Ethan and Ahuli talked quietly, though she revealed little. Her words were like pieces of a puzzle, hinting at a story that spanned lifetimes. Ethan could feel his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. There was a history here, a bond, a connection that transcended reason. And though the rational part of his mind remained cautious, another part, the part that had always longed for adventure and mystery, felt alive in a way it never had before. By evening, Ethan realized he was no longer alone in the cabin. Ahuli's presence filled the spaces around him, subtle and undeniable. And as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he knew that the cheap little cabin he had bought had become far more than a retreat. It had become the doorway to a story he could not yet fully comprehend, a story that had waited centuries to unfold. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt the first stirrings of understanding. The whispers were not just sounds. The cabin was not just a stranger. She was the key to a mystery he had never imagined, and he had just stepped into the first chapter. The next morning, Ethan woke with a strange mixture of excitement and unease. Last night's conversation with Ahuli kept replaying in his mind. Her presence, calm yet commanding, lingered even after he left the basement and tried to carry on with normal tasks. He had told himself countless times that what he was experiencing was impossible. Yet a part of him could not deny the truth in her words. The feeling of familiarity, of deep connection, gnawed at him in ways he could not explain. Ethan sat on the porch with his cup of coffee, staring out at the forest. The sunlight glinted through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. The birds chirped merrily, completely unaware of the strange tension in the little cabin. Ethan's mind, however, could not be at peace. He kept thinking about Ahuli's words. Our souls were tied. We were married in another time, you must remember. He had dismissed it before, but now, after seeing her and feeling that pull, he could not ignore it. Finally, curiosity overcame him. He descended the basement stairs once more, the wooden steps creaking beneath his weight. Ahuli was there, waiting, her eyes calm and knowing. She smiled as he approached. "You came back," she said softly, almost as if she had expected him.
I need to understand, Ethan admitted. I don't know how to make sense of any of this.
I don't know how you could know me or say we were married. Ahuli's gaze softened. Then let me help you see. You must open your mind and your heart, Ethan. What I will show you is not fiction. It is memory. It is history. It is truth. Ethan hesitated. His rational mind screamed at him to leave, to run far from this mysterious woman who claimed to know him in ways no one could. But another part, the part that longed for meaning beyond the ordinary, urged him to stay. Something in her voice, in her presence, felt undeniable. He nodded slowly. Ahuli extended her hand. Close your eyes. Let the memories come. Don't fight them. I will guide you. With trembling hands, Ethan closed his eyes. At first, there was nothing. The basement was silent, the faint smell of damp earth filling his senses. Then, slowly, images began to flicker in his mind like an old film. He saw a different place, a village surrounded by hills and rivers. He saw himself, not as he was now, but as a young man dressed in clothing from centuries ago. Beside him was a woman, Ahuli, her face unmistakable even in this other life. They were laughing, running through the fields, and the happiness in their eyes was undeniable. Ethan's breath caught. This isn't real," he whispered, though a small part of him knew it was. Ahuli's voice, calm and steady, guided him. "It is real, Ethan. These are memories of the lives we lived before. We were bound together by love, by promise, and by fate. In this life we have found each other again." The visions continued, more vivid with each passing moment. Ethan saw himself and Ahuli performing rituals in a ceremonial space, surrounded by the people of their village. He saw moments of joy, walking hand in hand through markets, celebrating festivals, sharing quiet evenings by a fire. But there were also moments of sorrow. He saw the village under attack, lives torn apart, and a separation that left him aching, lost, and desperate. Ahuli's eyes in the vision held the same calm and sorrow he remembered in this life. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as the memories unfolded. He had never believed in past lives, but the images, the emotions, the very essence of them felt undeniable. I remember. I think I remember," he said, voice trembling. Ahuli smiled gently. "Good. Do not be afraid of these memories. They are part of you, part of us. They have shaped who we are today, even if you did not realize it." Hours passed as Ethan sat with his eyes closed, exploring these memories under Ahuli's guidance. He began to understand the depth of their bond. It was not merely a connection of this lifetime, but a thread running through centuries, weaving their lives together across time. He felt the joy, the loss, and the promises made long ago. Each vision brought clarity, and with it, a profound sense of purpose. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw Ahuli watching him with a gentle intensity. "Do you understand now?" she asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "I think I do. It's overwhelming, but I feel it. I feel it all. The love, the loss, the..." "That connection is why you are here, in this cabin. It is why you bought it. The house, the land, the artifacts. They are all part of the story, part of the bridge between our past and this life. You were drawn here not by chance, but by fate. Ethan's mind raced. But why now? Why in this lifetime? Because the time is right, Ahuli said softly. We were separated before, but now the bond can be restored. You have been prepared, slowly, through feelings, through dreams, through whispers you barely noticed. And now you are ready to face the truth and reclaim what was always yours. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. The cabin, the whispers, the strange pull he had felt since arriving. It all made sense. This was not a coincidence. His life, the decision to leave the city, the purchase of the cabin, had all led him to this moment. He took a deep breath. I don't know what comes next. I feel like I've been asleep for so long and suddenly everything is waking up inside me.
Ahuli nodded.
And that is exactly what is happening. You are awakening, Ethan. Slowly, carefully, you are remembering who you are and who we are together. The next step is to live with this knowledge, to allow it to guide you. We have a journey ahead, one that will not be simple, but it is ours to take. Ethan looked around the basement, the shadows and artifacts no longer feeling eerie, but sacred. The air seemed lighter, charged with a sense of history and purpose. The small objects he had once thought were merely decorations were now symbols of a life he had lived before, connections that had waited centuries to be understood. I think I understand, he said finally. I still have questions, but I feel like I'm ready to learn. Ahuli smiled, her eyes bright. Then we begin, step by step. The memories will come in time. The past is never truly lost, and the future will unfold as it should. But first, you must accept what is here, what is real, and what has always been true between us. Ethan nodded again, a sense of calm settling over him. He still did not know everything, and the mystery of the cabin and Ahuli's presence was far from solved. But for the first time he felt a clarity and purpose that he had never known in his ordinary life. The whispers, the strange feelings, the artifacts, all were part of something larger, something that he was only beginning to understand. They spent the rest of the day in quiet reflection. Ethan explored the basement more carefully, noticing details he had missed before. The careful arrangement of objects, the worn paths in the wooden floor, the way the light from the small window fell on certain items. Each detail seemed meaningful, as if the room itself held messages for him, guiding him toward understanding. By evening, Ethan felt a strange peace. The cabin no longer felt like just a building. It was alive with history, with memory, and with the bond between him and Ahuli. He had glimpsed a world beyond the ordinary, a life beyond the life he had always known. And though fear and disbelief still lingered at the edges of his mind, they were fading under the weight of undeniable truth. As he lay in bed that night, the memory of the visions and Ahuli's words stayed with him. He realized that the cabin, the forest, and even the whispers had been leading him here, preparing him to awaken to a truth he had never imagined. The bond with Ahuli was real, timeless, and unbreakable. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt that he was not alone in the world, that he was part of a story far greater than himself. And somewhere deep within, he knew that the journey had only just begun. The following days in the cabin were unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. At first, he tried to treat things as normal. He cleaned, unpacked, explored the forest around the cabin, but the presence of Ahuli was impossible to ignore. She moved through the house gracefully, always quiet, always calm, and yet she seemed to command the space in a way that made him feel both comforted and unsettled. Sometimes she would disappear into corners of the cabin, appearing only when he turned to look, as if she had been waiting for him to notice something he had missed. One afternoon, driven by a mix of curiosity and unease, Ethan decided to explore the deeper corners of the cabin he hadn't fully examined. He noticed small carvings on the wooden beams, faint symbols etched into the walls, and faded patterns on the floorboards. Each symbol seemed meaningful, but he could not decipher it. Ahuli followed silently, her eyes watching him with gentle patience. "These markings," Ethan said finally, pointing to the carvings. "What do they mean?" "They are messages from the past," Ahuli replied. The people who came before us, our ancestors, left signs to guide those who would come after. This cabin is a sacred place. It has been waiting for you, Ethan, for a very long time. Ethan ran his fingers lightly over one of the symbols, a strange warmth spreading through his hand. Waiting for me? But why? I just bought this cabin by chance. Ahuli shook her head gently. Nothing in this life is by chance. You were drawn here. Your soul recognized this place, just as it recognized me. It was always meant to be. The cabin holds memories, energies, and protections. It is alive in a way most people cannot see, but you can feel it, because you are part of it. Ethan tried to understand, but his rational mind resisted. He wanted to dismiss it as superstition or coincidence, and yet there was something undeniable in the way the air seemed to thrum with energy around them, as if the walls themselves were breathing. He shook his head, trying to focus on something ordinary, but ordinary no longer existed here. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain pelted the roof, and the wind howled through the trees, shaking the cabin. Ethan tried to sleep, but the basement door called to him again, as if something or someone was waiting. He could hear whispers, faint but insistent, echoing through the walls. The rational part of him screamed to ignore it, to hide under the blankets and wait for morning. But another part, the part that had always sought adventure, mystery, and truth, urged him to face it. Grabbing a flashlight, Ethan descended into the basement. The air was colder here, damp and heavy with a smell of earth and old wood. Shadows danced along the walls, twisted and strange in the beam of his flashlight. And there she was, Ahuli, standing quietly near the center of the room. "You came," she said softly. "I knew you would. The storm has awakened the energies. The cabin responds to you, to us."
Ethan's heart pounded.
Energies? What do you mean? I don't understand. Everything feels alive here. It is alive, Ahuli replied. It protects us, guides us, and reminds us of the bond we share. The storm awakens what has been waiting. You must see, Ethan, that you cannot escape what is meant to be. For a moment, Ethan wanted to argue, to run, to escape this strange otherworldly connection. He considered leaving the cabin, driving back to the city, pretending none of this had happened. But as he turned to reach for the stairs, the basement seemed to stretch, the walls shifting slightly, the shadows moving in ways that made the exit seem farther than it was. A chill ran down his spine. The cabin itself was telling him that he could not leave yet. Ethan froze, his mind racing. What is happening?" Ahuli stepped closer. "The cabin tests those who enter. It shows you your fears and your desires, your resistance and your acceptance. You feel trapped because you are not yet ready to fully embrace what is here. But do not be afraid. This is not punishment, it is guidance." Ethan swallowed hard. He had always been a rational man, someone who believed in reason and explanation. But here, in this basement with the storm raging above and Ahuli's calm presence before him, reason failed him. He realized that the cabin was alive in a way that defied understanding. And perhaps it was right. The only way forward was to accept what he could not yet fully understand. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to explore this balance. He attempted to live a normal life within the cabin, cooking meals, tidying up, walking in the forest. But the supernatural presence of Ahuli and the cabin's energies were constant reminders that he was part of something larger. Sometimes objects in the cabin seemed to move slightly when he wasn't looking. Whispers echoed through the rooms at night, and shadows flickered with forms that were not entirely human. At first, these events frightened him, but gradually, under Ahuli's guidance, he began to see them as signs, reminders of the bond he shared with her and with the place itself. One evening, while Ethan sat by the fireplace, he spoke aloud. "I don't know if I can handle this. The cabin, you, all of it. It's too much sometimes." Ahuli knelt beside him, placing a hand on his arm. "You do not need to handle it alone. I am here, and the cabin is here. Everything that feels overwhelming is also a chance to understand, to grow, to remember who you are. Fear is natural, but it is not the truth. The truth is that we are connected, and this place is our anchor." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a strange mix of fear and relief. The cabin, with all its mysteries, was no longer just a house. It was a teacher, a guide, and a reminder of the bond he had always shared with Ahuli. He realized that resistance only made the experiences more intense. Acceptance, even partial, brought clarity. The nights were the hardest. The whispers, shadows, and strange movements became more frequent. Sometimes Ethan would see fleeting images of other lives, other people, and events that seemed centuries old. At first he recoiled in fear, unsure of what he was witnessing. But Ahuli was always there, guiding him gently. "These visions are pieces of our history," she said. "They are not meant to scare you. They are meant to teach you, to remind you, to show you the depth of our connection." Slowly, Ethan began to understand. The cabin was not a trap, nor was Ahuli a threat. Both were guides, helping him awaken to truths he had never imagined. Every creak, every shadow, every whisper was part of the story he was destined to live. And with each passing day, the fear that had gripped him began to lessen, replaced by curiosity, respect, and a cautious acceptance. One particularly stormy night, the wind rattled the windows and the lightning illuminated the forest in brief flashes. Ethan and Ahuli sat together in the basement, surrounded by artifacts and shadows. He turned to her and asked quietly, "Do you think it's possible that all of this is meant to prepare me for something more? Something I don't yet understand?" Ahuli smiled, her eyes steady. "Yes, the cabin, the storms, the visions, they are all preparation. You must learn to trust the bond, to trust the place, and to trust yourself. When the time comes, you will understand fully. But until then, patience and openness are your greatest allies." Ethan nodded. The words settled in his mind. He realized that running away, resisting, or ignoring the strange events would not help him. The cabin, Ahuli, and the unseen energies were guiding him, showing him the way to something far larger than the life he had once known. By the end of the week, Ethan felt a subtle shift inside himself. Fear still existed, but it was tempered by a growing sense of purpose. He was learning to listen to the whispers, to understand the movements in the shadows, to see the signs in the carvings and artifacts around him. The cabin had become more than a home. It was a living entity, a teacher, and a doorway to the truths he had been missing for lifetimes. And through it all, Ahuli remained a constant presence. She did not push him, nor did she force understanding. She simply guided, showing patience and strength, reminding him that the bond between them was unbreakable, and that the cabin itself would protect and guide them both. As Ethan lay in bed that night, the wind howling outside and the whispers fading into the background, he realized that the struggle was not against Ahuli or the cabin. It was against his own doubt and fear, accepting the supernatural, embracing the unknown, and trusting the bond with Ahuli were the only paths forward. And for the first time, Ethan felt ready to take that step, to stop resisting the extraordinary, and to begin the journey fully toward understanding, connection, and the mysteries that had waited centuries for him to uncover. The days that followed felt both ordinary and extraordinary to Ethan. The stormy nights and whispers had become a rhythm he could almost understand. The cabin no longer felt like a simple building. It was alive, breathing with the memories and energies that had waited for him. And Ahuli was no longer just a mysterious presence. She had become a guide, a teacher, and a partner in something far greater than either of them could explain. One morning, Ahuli suggested that it was time for Ethan to take the next step, to begin the ritual that would help them reconcile the past and fully awaken the bond that had stretched across lifetimes. Ethan felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with fear. He had experienced visions, whispers, and memories, but the idea of performing a ritual sounded both mystical and intimidating. "What will I need to do?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "Nothing that is dangerous," Ahuli said, smiling softly. "You must only trust and follow your instincts. The cabin will guide us, and I will be with you every step of the way. This is not a test of strength, but a test of understanding, acceptance, and love. She led him to the basement, which had transformed in his mind from a shadowy, frightening space to a sacred place filled with symbols and artifacts. Candles flickered along the walls, and the carvings in the wooden beams seemed to glow faintly, as if recognizing the moment that had come. The air was thick with anticipation, and Ethan felt his heart pound in a way that was both frightening and thrilling. "Sit here," Ahuli instructed, guiding him to the center of the room. "Focus on the bond, on what is true. Close your eyes, breathe, and let your mind open." Ethan obeyed, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He inhaled deeply, feeling the warmth of Ahuli's hand as she guided his fingers to the artifacts laid out around them. Small stones, feathers, and pieces of carved wood seemed to hum with energy. As he held them, memories from past lives stirred again, not as vivid visions this time, but as gentle echoes of emotion. He felt love, joy, loss, longing, and hope, all mingling inside him. Ahuli's voice was soft but firm. "Feel the connection, Ethan. Do not resist it. Let it flow through you. These objects, the cabin, the symbols, they are channels, not obstacles. We are not performing a trick. We are reconnecting what was always ours, what has always existed." Ethan closed his eyes tighter, letting the sensations wash over him. He felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest, a lightness, as if something inside him was being unlocked. The whispers he had heard for days returned, but now they were clear, like voices guiding him rather than haunting him. They spoke in words he could not understand fully, but the meaning was clear. This is the moment. You are ready. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Ethan felt his mind and soul expanding, connecting not only with Ahuli but with the cabin itself. He understood things he could never have explained, how the artifacts linked to their ancestors, how the carvings held messages from the past, how the bond between him and Ahuli had been alive even when separated by lifetimes. He realized that the cabin had been a guardian, a teacher, and a bridge leading him to this moment. When he opened his eyes, Ahuli was looking at him, her expression calm and full of understanding. "Do you see now?" she asked. Ethan nodded slowly, tears spilling down his face.
I think I understand. Everything.
The cabin, the whispers, the past, us.
I understand now.
She reached for his hand. "Then let us complete the ritual together. It is simple but powerful. Speak your intentions, Ethan. Speak the truth of your heart." He hesitated, then spoke softly. I accept you. I accept the bond that has always been between us, across time, across lifetimes. I am ready to remember, to honor it, and to move forward together." Ahuli smiled and repeated similar words. As they spoke, the air in the basement seemed to shift. The shadows no longer felt strange or threatening. The light from the candles danced in a warmer, golden glow. Ethan felt a rush of energy, a connection that transcended space, time, and understanding. He was not just in the cabin, he was part of it. Part of a story that had begun centuries ago and was still unfolding. After the ritual, Ethan and Ahuli sat quietly. The storm outside had calmed, leaving only a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of the trees. The whispers had faded, replaced by a peaceful silence that felt welcoming rather than eerie. Ethan felt a deep sense of clarity he had never known before. The fear and doubt that had haunted him in the first days were gone. In their place was understanding, purpose, and connection. "You feel it, don't you?" Ahuli said softly. "The bond is complete. Not because the ritual did it, but because you were ready to accept it. We were always meant to find each other. The cabin guided you here. The memories guided you here. And your heart guided you here. All of it has led to this moment." Ethan nodded. "I feel it. I don't think I've ever felt anything like it. It's like everything I've been searching for, everything I've been missing, was waiting for me here." Ahuli placed her hand gently on his shoulder. And now our journey begins anew. There will be challenges, questions, and mysteries. But we face them together. The past is our foundation. The present is our opportunity. And the future is ours to shape. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan began to see the cabin and the surrounding forest in a completely new light. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the leaves, every shadow that flickered on the walls became part of the living story he shared with Ahuli. He learned to read the carvings, understand the artifacts, and listen to the subtle energies that filled the cabin. The strange experiences that had once terrified him now felt like a natural part of life, a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Ethan and Ahuli worked together to honor the history of the cabin. They carefully cleaned the artifacts, arranged the sacred items with intention, and spent hours exploring the forest, learning about the plants, stones, and waterways that had been part of the lives of their ancestors. Every day brought new understanding, new connection, new wonder. The cabin was no longer just a cheap building he had bought. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a doorway to a timeless story. Yet even as peace settled in, a part of Ethan knew that mysteries remained. The cabin, the artifacts, and the energies around them hinted at deeper secrets, stories yet untold. He understood that life with Ahuli was not about having all the answers. It was about accepting the unknown, embracing the connection, and exploring the journey together. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Ethan and Ahuli sat on the porch, hands intertwined. The air was calm, the forest alive with gentle sounds, and the cabin seemed to hum with a quiet energy. Ethan looked at Ahuli, and for the first time he truly understood the depth of their bond, not just in this life, but across all the lives they had shared. "I never would have believed this was possible," he said softly. "But now I wouldn't want it any other way." Ahuli smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Possibility has nothing to do with it, Ethan. It is truth, and truth has always found its way to those who are ready to see it. We were ready, and now we have each other again." As night fell, the stars appeared above the forest, shining with a brilliance that felt almost otherworldly. The cabin stood quietly, a witness to the bond it had nurtured for centuries. A home for souls reunited, and a place where the extraordinary had become ordinary. Ethan knew that he had stepped into something greater than himself, something timeless and sacred. He also knew that life with Ahuli would continue to be filled with mysteries, challenges, and wonders, but he was no longer afraid. Together they looked out into the forest, holding hands, understanding that the journey was ongoing. The past had been honored, the present was embraced, and the future remained a path waiting to be discovered. And somewhere deep in the quiet of the night, the cabin whispered once more, a soft, gentle promise of connection, guidance, and timeless love. Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart he had never known before. He had come to the cabin seeking solitude and adventure, but he had found something far greater, a connection beyond time, a love beyond reason, and a life filled with meaning, mystery, and wonder. The cabin, the forest, and Ahuli had all become part of him, and he knew without a doubt that he would never be the same again. And though the world outside remained vast and uncertain, Ethan had discovered a home, a story, and a bond that would last beyond this life, beyond the next, and beyond anything he had ever imagined.